Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I'm unable to use my own voice at the moment, so for now I'll be narrating with a premium AI voice. I appreciate your understanding and support. Infinite Mana. In the Apocalypse. Chapter 4:191. The First Feast. 2. Noah watched Ozymandias settle from his feeding, the overwhelming hunger diminishing to something merely ravenous rather than all-consuming. Through their connection, he felt the temporary satisfaction of everything's digested, converted to pure sustenance. It prompted a question that had been building since Kor's return, so he turned to her. "What about your hunger?" he asked, looking at the tiny form that had once made existence itself nervous. "What about the hunger of the one called the First Hunger?" Hor smiled at the question with layers of meaning that contradicted themselves. She floated upward slightly, bringing herself to a more conversational height, though her diminutive size made the gesture more endearing than imposing. "When it comes to inevitabilities, there are vast differences in scale," she began, her voice carrying the weight of ancient understanding. "We're not all equal in our hunger, our methods, our capabilities. There are tiers, classifications." She paused, seeming to consider how to explain concepts that transcended normal understanding. "I could tell you complex theories about hierarchical consumption matrices, about the relationship between hunger and existence, about how appetite correlates with existential weight. But ultimately, none of that would make sense without context you lack." Her expression grew more serious, though amusement still danced in those abyssal eyes. "What you need to know is simple. My hunger is ravenous, tremendous to an extent that I could open my mouth right now and devour everything and everyone here. This shore, its inhabitants, you, your bundle of potential order, even your newly made inevitability. All of it could disappear in a single swallow." Noah felt his existence tense at those words, though he maintained his calm exterior. Through their bond, he sensed Ozymandias's instinctive recognition of a superior predator, hunger acknowledging greater hunger. "But I don't," Hor continued, her smile growing devilish. "I could have chosen to devour you when you first found me, what seems like forever ago now. Just opened my mouth and made you part of my collection of consumed everythings. But I chose not to." She spun in the air, her tiny form radiating satisfaction. "That's what makes me different from most inevitabilities. I have the option of choice. My way of existence grants me something most hungers lack: discretion. Choice. I hunger, and boy can I eat. But I choose when to feast." Her expression darkened slightly, though her smile remained. "The day I truly open my mouth to eat will be a day nobody wants to be near me. Because when I choose to feast, I don't leave scraps." Noah processed these terrifying admissions while feeling the symbolic heart of hunger pulse within him. It should grant him absolute control over her, should allow him to rein in even the first hunger if necessary. Yet hearing her speak so casually about consuming everything made him wonder if even absolute control had limits. Ozymandias descended from the aquarium, his tentacle architecture form moving with newfound grace that came from being properly fed. He landed near them, creating a triangle of conversation between himself, Noah, and Kor. "You seem very calm about all this," Hor observed, studying Noah's composed expression. "Perhaps you don't understand the full extent of what my being here means. You've put yourself in tremendous peril by allowing me to exist again." Noah maintained his steady gaze, waiting for her to elaborate. "I'm not the positive development you might think," she said, her tone growing more serious. "My enemies are terrifying beyond comprehension. Though I don't even consider them enemies, I'm far too peace-loving for such designations. They certainly wish for my permanent end, and they've achieved it before." She paused, letting the weight of that settle. "Once they learn of my return, and they will learn, you'll have gained enemies you can't imagine. I won't list them all, the thought alone might break you. But consider just one: the living paradox." Noah's eyes flickered with the first sign of genuine concern. The living paradox. That ancient, unfathomable force that had shaped the earliest histories. The entity that had caused Kor's cessation in the first place. "The living paradox will be your enemy now," Hor said with certainty that made the shore's eternal light dim slightly. "Simply by association with me, you've painted a target on everything you are and everything you might become." Noah took these words seriously, feeling their weight settle onto his shoulders. Any being with sense would be terrified at the prospect of having the living paradox as an enemy. It was like declaring war on causality itself, challenging forces that had existed before existence properly organized. Yet even understanding this, even knowing the magnitude of danger he had invited, Noah found his resolve unchanged. If he could go back, if he could choose again whether to plant that seed of inevitability, he would make the same choice. Horror was that critical to possibilities he was only beginning to glimpse. "Don't worry too much, outsider," Horror said, apparently reading something in his expression. "I don't like others being in peril because of me. I'll help you, and myself in the process." Noah's tension eased slightly at this assurance. The living paradox, couldn't they be dead or missing like the others? Nobody has seen the creature or the living existences in this age. They're myths, legends, cautionary tales. Horror laughed with genuine mirth that made reality nervous. "From what I know, the creature and the living existences are very much here. It would be nearly impossible for them to truly die. They're woven too deeply into existence's fabric." She paused thoughtfully. "Perhaps something has changed during my absence, but based on my understanding, they are not AMD should not be dead." The certainty in those words spread across the shore like ripples in still water. Sigrid approached them, her entire existence vibrating with order's brilliant white radiance. She moved with the controlled grace of someone approaching something dangerous but necessary. "Where are they then?" she asked, her voice carrying the frustration of someone tired of mysteries. "What happened to all these unfathomably powerful beings? We hear stories but see nothing. No evidence of their continued existence." Chapter 4102. The Second Traversal. Icor shrugged with the casualness of someone discussing weather. "Who knows? I've been gone for an unknown duration. Could be eons, could be epochs. I can't say what's transpired between then and now." Her expression grew mockingly thoughtful. "Though I can say that before the living paradox collapsed my existence, the folds were incredibly dangerous for every life form." She paused dramatically. "Perhaps they all made up after killing enough? Maybe this is now an era of peace and prosperity?" She laughed at her own suggestion. "Ha ha!" The sarcasm dripped from every word, her laughter suggesting she had just told the most ridiculous joke in existence. "But seriously," she continued, her amusement fading, "if things were that chaotic, then they're likely worse now. Chaos tends to compound, not resolve. If I were a regular life form in this age I know nothing about, I might just end myself rather than wait for whatever's coming." She shook her head as if dismissing heavy thoughts. "But oh well, one must enjoy existence while it lasts, right? So, outsider, do you have any other fun things here? Your shore is abysmally tiny with very few attractions." The tonal shift was so abrupt that both Noah and Sigrid stared at her. She had pivoted from discussing existential threats to critiquing his shore's value with the ease of someone changing clothes. In the distance, Moiraine continued forming her glyphs and then sacrificing them, her expression heavy with the implications of what she was overhearing. The air around her crackled with paradoxical energy that warned others to maintain distance. "My shore is only a day or two old," Noah replied calmly. "I'm just getting started, but never mind that." He walked closer to Kor, looking at her tiny form while simultaneously feeling like he was gazing up at something immense. Her existence carried weight that transcended physical size. "You said you'd help us since your existence puts us in peril. How exactly?" Hor tilted her head, pointing at Ozymandias with one tiny finger. "Isn't that the first way? You want something else already? Digest the first boon before demanding seconds, outsider." She smiled with mischief. "Though if you insist, grant me administrator privileges to this little shore of yours. I can build some interesting things. You clearly lack creativity." "Administrator privileges?" Noah's eyes widened as he looked around the shore as if seeing it newly. The early veiled shore suddenly glowed with responsive light, and prompts materialized. The early veiled shore states, "Even I did not know this." The life form core seems a bit scary. She is requesting administrator privileges. After coursing through the weavings of the shore, a slight possibility has been ascertained regarding administrator privileges. This grants secondary rights to alter constructs and features, and it can be given to a total of 3 life forms apart from the early creature Osmont. Should this access be granted to Core? Note: this seems like it could go very right or very wrong. Noah studied the prompts, weighing risks against benefits. Hor would be a terrifying ally against enemies that now included the living paradox. Ozymandias was the first boon, and if she could enhance the shore itself? Okay, he said decisively. White gold light erupted from the shore, gathering around Core's tiny form. Her expression brightened with childlike joy as she raised her small hands in victory, floating upward as the light integrated with her being. How shall I start? She mused, looking around with new authority. Planting inevitabilities? New constructs? Oh, you're right at the cusp of becoming a radiant shore. Interesting. How about we focus on that first so you aren't so tiny? If we can get you a bit bigger, and then raise a little farm of inevitabilities by the sea, Light began gathering around her with purpose that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. Noah watched as possibilities he hadn't imagined began manifesting. Hor's addition might have just catapulted his shore's development by weeks, and these were weeks in his timescale of advancement. Sigrid moved beside him, her voice low but direct. Can we trust her? Noah smiled and nodded, though internally he acknowledged the gamble. Trust was perhaps too strong a word, but sometimes you had to work with dangerous tools to face dangerous enemies. He turned to Ozymandias, feeling through their connection how various abilities were approaching reset. The glyphs of perpetual harvest would soon be available again, urged toward readiness by the seed itself. Before the Kleos Concordat, he had possibilities to explore, power to accumulate, preparations to make. When he and his forces made their entrance, his strength could be drastically different from what anyone expected and what it was now. The game was accelerating, and Noah intended to be ready for whatever moves the living paradox or others might make, regardless of how weak he currently was. After all, weakness was temporary. Was he not a mere Primarch days ago? He now swam above a few 100 billion complexity and purity where honored living existences were. At this moment, Noah walked toward Moiraine, his steps creating small impressions in the golden sand as he approached where she sat surrounded by swirling energies of paradox. Her face showed concentration mixed with wariness, the latter directed toward their newest addition to the shore. How goes the progress? He asked, studying the complex patterns she was weaving. Moiraine smiled, though her gaze kept flickering toward where Hor was redesigning aspects of the shore with casual impossibility. Just 10 more shards of the seed of the lost forgotten principle, existential duality, before it can form and be planted. She paused, her expression growing more serious. Is that truly the first hunger? The figure barely mentioned in stories? Noah's eyes sharpened at this. Barely mentioned. What have you heard? Almost nothing, Moiraine admitted, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Paradoxes mentioned her name perhaps twice in all our histories, but whenever she appeared in stories, her name alone carried fear comparable to the living existences themselves. Chapter 4103, The Second Traversal. 2. Her eyes turned sharp as she studied Noah with new intensity. How does Sir know such a being? Who is Sir, really? She hesitated, then voiced what had clearly been bothering her. You aren't some reincarnation of one of the living existences or something, right? Noah laughed, genuine mirth that made the tension ease from Moiraine's shoulders. If a day ever comes where some nonsense about me being reincarnated from something else emerges, I'll end my own existence, he said with absolute certainty. No, I am what I am. Noah Osmont, the true emperor of quintessence, the true emperor of tyranny, the true emperor of infinity. I will never be a knockoff or echo of something else. Moiraine breathed out a visible sigh of relief. I apologize for my words, sir. Noah patted her head gently, the gesture both dismissive and affectionate. It's okay. He reached into his storage and produced the remaining shards of the seed of the lost forgotten principle, each one sparkling with contradictory light that suggested they simultaneously existed and didn't. Give these and the rest to the Infiniverse when ready, he instructed. She should already have administrator privileges, or rather, something exceeding them given her nature. A prompt confirmed his understanding. The infinite early Osmontian shore is interconnected. Access level, beyond administrator. The shore and infiniverse are one. Noah nodded, considering a few things. This lost-forgotten principle would be different from his seed of perpetual harvest that came from the first farmer. There would be no immediate percentage access, no instant power, only potential that would bloom with time and cultivation. It was a seed of a lost-forgotten principle, as only after it was planted, matured, and bloomed would it give him any access to existential duality. Unlike the seed of this principle of perpetual harvest, which was not lost or forgotten, initiated by the first farmer and triggered to completion by the infiniverse. So the second possible principle, or really lost-forgotten principle, would take time. Though for him, time had become an increasingly flexible concept. What others might achieve in eons, he seemed to accomplish in days. Moiraine accepted the shards carefully, cradling them like fragile possibilities. Noah moved on to where Ruination and the Infiniverse stood, both watching Kor with expressions that mixed fascination and calculation. "Don't worry, Master," the Infiniverse said, her green-gold form pulsing with barely contained power. "I'll keep the first hunger company and extract as much information as possible. She's likely the biggest treasure trove of knowledge available right now. We just need to strip her of everything she has." Noah shook his head with amusement at her phrasing, then turned to Ruination. "How are your projects progressing? The Infinite Forge? Affixes?" Ruination blinked, her honesty refreshing in its directness. "Their work's in progress. Master is advancing so rapidly that anything I could design now would be minuscule compared to what you currently possess." Her eyes blazed with the light of endings, determination crystallizing. "But don't worry, I'll consult with Cis Infiniverse and others. The goal is creating something that scales with Master's pace of progression, not something you'll outgrow in hours." Noah nodded approvingly. "Good. Take the time to do it right." He moved ahead. He checked his early Atlas of the Folds, feeling it burn with multicolored brilliance. The towers of Osmont blazed with accumulated power, his heart also shining brighter still. The stronger his heart, the less delay there was until he could traverse again. The grander his towers, the more time he could stay. His strength now compared to a day ago was incomparably greater. Almost 100 towers had silently climbed toward the second stage, with some like the Protagonist and Infinity Towers approaching the third. He wouldn't be limited to an hour in the earliest folds this time around. He would... Whom? His atlas pulsed with sudden urgency, as if his thoughts allowed it to express itself, prompts materializing. Temporal traversal to earliest folds. Expanded functionality detected. Your tremendously increased complexity and purity have unlocked new options. Ozymandias's immense purity adds dimensional stability. Both bodies can now traverse as one unified existence. New feature, multiple destination options. 3 random potential destinations now available. Warning, destination selection remains random. You cannot control which location you arrive at. View available destinations for next traversal. Noah considered carefully before responding. Show me the 3 possibilities. His atlas lit up like a map of impossibility, revealing Destination 1, the Hunger Memorial. Classification, Inevitability, Convergence Point. Description, where hungry things go to remember satiation. Danger level, mysteriously undefined. Note, even the destination seems uncertain about itself. Destination 2, the breeding grounds of the first. Classification, early creature genesis. Site, Description, where early creatures first learned they existed. Danger level, absolutely terrifying. Warning, mortality rate historically 9.97%. Destination 3, the living emotions garden of feeling. Classification, primordial emotional nexus. Description, where joy and sorrow learned they were different. Danger level, deceptively beautiful. Note, happiness guaranteed, survival not included. Noah studied these options with growing concern. Each one promised either death or transformation, with little middle ground. He floated back toward Kor, who was surrounded by even grander green-gold light as she continued reshaping the shore's fundamental structure towards becoming a radiant shore. If I have the capability to enter the earliest folds again, he began carefully, like when I first met you, could I tell you some names to see which would be ideal? Hor blinked, pausing her work to give him her full attention. You are one daring existence, outsider. The perils of the earliest folds could unwind you many times over, yet you choose to return? She tilted her head with something approaching respect. Those like you made fine existences back then. Do you want to know what fate existences like you typically faced? Without waiting for response, she continued. In existence, there are beings who steer clear of danger and risk. They survive longer, certainly, but they get nowhere meaningful. They exist without truly living. Her expression grew more serious. Then there are beings who see danger clearly, understand the risks completely, yet still move forward. Their mortality rate is significantly higher. Most die horribly in ways that make cessation seem merciful. She paused for effect. But among them, from that small percentage who survive their own ambition, arise the leaders of existence, the ones who shape reality rather than being shaped by it. Her smile returned, carrying layers of meaning. I hope you're among those who become leaders of existence, outsider, and not like the many others who become cautionary tales. Before we head to the next chapter, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep the stories coming. Chapter 4104, The Second Traversal. 3. Noah almost sighed at the ominous encouragement as he continued calmly. I hope so too. The 3 destinations that are possible are the Hunger Memorial, the breeding grounds of the first, and the Living Emotions Garden of Feeling. Hor's eyes widened dramatically. She blinked several times, as if confirming she had heard correctly. The Hunger Memorial, the breeding grounds, the Living Emotions Garden. She repeated each name with increasing disbelief. If any of those places match what I remember, you will die in each of them. The only question is how quickly. Boom! Noah waited for her to elaborate, because an elaboration was fucking needed after such words. The Hunger Memorial is where inevitabilities go to mourn what they can never have, satisfaction. Being there while not fully inevitable yourself would be like bleeding in waters full of sharks who haven't eaten since before time was invented. She shook her head at the second option. The breeding grounds of the first is where early creatures discovered themselves. It was wild, archaic, primal. The process was violent, experimental, often fatal for all parties involved. Even I avoided that place when it was active. Her expression grew oddly wistful at the third. And the Living Emotions Garden seems beautiful, peaceful even. But it's where pure emotions exist without filters or controls. You could die of joy there. Literally experience so much happiness your existence forgets to continue. Or sorrow so profound you retroactively never existed. But, well, an inevitability like your other self would survive there just fine. She looked at him with something approaching concern. Each destination offers unique ways to cease existing, outsider. Are you certain you want to risk any of them? The question hung in the air between them, carrying weight that transcended simple concern for his safety. This was about whether his ambition had finally exceeded his capability to survive it. All 3 possible destinations were deemed equally dangerous, each offering unique flavors of cessation. Noah's gaze became stern as he processed the implications, but his resolve remained unshaken. He would go through with it. After all, he was without fear or doubt. Those everythings had been carved away from his existence, and he had made this same choice a day ago when he first ventured into the earliest folds. Everything that had occurred there had led to this moment, this accumulation of power and possibility. Hor observed his expression with the particular understanding of someone who had seen such determination before. She sighed wistfully, the sound carrying eons of memory, and tapped her finger in the air. An obsidian light shot from her fingertip, curling through space to settle in his ear like an ethereal earpiece. Since I found you by your lonesome back then, you shouldn't be able to take others with you, she explained, her tone deceptively casual. So all I'll do is leave you a shred of my consciousness as it should be able to traverse with you. It won't be able to act or interfere, just an accessory in your ear that can observe nearby surroundings and talk. She turned her attention back to reshaping the shore, as if its architecture was suddenly more important than his potential death. Maybe my knowledge will help ensure you don't die too quickly, outsider. The nonchalance of her delivery couldn't hide what she was doing, going above and beyond to ensure his survival while pretending it was merely convenient. Noah smiled at the personality of this unique entity he still couldn't fully understand. The weight of her authority settled in his ear, a presence that was simultaneously there and not there, like remembering a whisper. A temporal traversal into the earliest folds, where only an instant or seconds would pass in the current age while he experienced hours or days in the past. For someone who needed time more than anything else, who could accomplish ridiculous things in short periods, this was invaluable. He closed his eyes and connected to his early atlas of the folds, feeling its eagerness to bridge impossible distances once more. Let's go. Initiate temporal traversal. Reality immediately responded. Critical traversal initiating. Second journey to the earliest folds. Destination selection. Random. Rolling the dice. Extreme caution required. Enhanced parameters. Due to increased complexity. Time limit extended to 24 hours, previously 1 hour. Both bodies, Noah and Ozymandias, will traverse together. Stability increased by 300% from previous journey. Death still results in complete existential extinction. Destination selected. The breeding grounds of the first us. Oh no. Do you wish to proceed? This action cannot be undone. Noah's eyes flashed with a light of tyranny. His gaze remained even more so as he bellowed within his existence. Proceed! Way A! Noah's confirmation rang through existence with practiced certainty. His entire being began to buzz with frequencies that had become familiar, yet remained impossible. The sensation of folding through time started in his existences, both his primary existence and Ozymandias resonating in harmony. Whap! Both bodies folded in on themselves simultaneously, reality accepting that its rules were more like suggestions. The spaces where they had been showed no evidence of their presence, as if they had been edited out of the present to be pasted into the past. Transference initiated to the breeding grounds of the first. Duration of traversal. Experiencing all of time and none of it. Probability of survival. You really don't want to know. But you defied the odds before, so maybe? Note. At least it's not the living emotions garden. Boom. The journey felt different this time. Where his first traversal had been chaotic, desperate, held together by will and luck, this passage was steadier. His towers of Osmont blazed like lighthouses through temporal fog, each one a beacon keeping his existence oriented. The 100 towers that had reached the second stage created a constellation of guidance through the nothing-between moments. His increased complexity made the journey almost comfortable, if comfort could apply to being stretched across eons and cycles of an unknown number of years. He felt years pass in heartbeats, experienced the weight of ages in blinks, but his consciousness remained coherent, observing rather than merely surviving. The goad materialized in his primary body's grip, while Ozymandias' tentacles instinctively reached through dimensions, both forms using their nature to navigate. The journey that had felt like it nearly torn him apart before now felt like swimming upstream through thick water. Difficult but manageable. Existential integrity, 99%, 98%, 97%. Stabilizing factors enhanced. Dual existence resonance, plus 25% stability. Elevated stages of towers, glyphs of the seed of the principle of perpetual harvest, plus 40% stability, previous experience, plus 20% stability, core's consciousness fragment, plus 5% stability, final integrity, 96%, traversal optimal. Your existence has adapted rather remarkably. After eternities that lasted seconds, or perhaps seconds that contained eternities, reality reasserted itself with particular violence. Whap! They arrived. Boom! The sensation of arrival hit both bodies simultaneously. Every atom of their beings began drinking in the raw, early existential authority that saturated this place. But something was different from his previous destination. Where the unnamed location had been wild, untamed possibility, this place felt intentional, glorious, Unfathomable. Chapter 4105. The First Folds. Location reached. The breeding grounds of the first. Temporal coordinate. Era of experimental genesis. Environmental analysis. Atmosphere contains hyper-concentrated early existential authority. Passive absorption rate, 500,000. CQ/PQ per second. Life force density, beyond measurement. Hostile entity detection, everywhere. Timer started. 23:59:59 remaining. Noah absorbed the environmental analysis while his dual perception, through both his primary body and Ozymandias, and took in surroundings that defied conventional scale. Above stretched a sky that wasn't merely vast, but infinite in ways that made infinity seem modest. It extended for light years in every direction, yet somehow his enhanced perception could grasp a small portion of it. Colors that predated the concept of color swirled through atmospheric layers thick with potential. Not clouds, but congregations of unformed possibilities drifted through heights that had no upper limit. Below and around him spread a forest that redefined what forests could be. Trees tens of thousands of miles tall rose from ground that might have been soil or might have been crystallized time. Their trunks were so massive that entire civilizations could have existed on their bark without ever knowing they were on a tree. Branches that could have supported worlds reached toward that impossible sky, their leaves catching light from sources that weren't quite stars. Everything carried an archaic grandeur that made ancient feel young. This wasn't just old, this was from before age had meaning, when existence was still experimenting with what it wanted to be. The breeding grounds of the first. Hor's voice resonated in his mind, carrying amusement mixed with nostalgia. Also known as the First Folds, though that name came later when beings needed to categorize everything. Her consciousness fragment pulsed in his ear as she continued, Noah slowly turning to take in the impossible scope of their surroundings. This is the smallest unit of what was called a stellar domain, a world. But don't let smallest fool you. This single world, these grounds, are the size of what you call an entire fold. Space hadn't learned to be efficiently packed yet, so everything was grander, more spread out, more excessive. The air they breathed, if it could be called air, was thick with authority. Not just early existential authority, but something more complex. Noah could feel it with each inhalation. Threads of every type of power that would eventually be separated into distinct categories. Living origins, living laws, living concepts, all of it flowed together here in primordial soup that hadn't yet been divided into courses. All living existential authorities flow here alongside early existential authority, Hor confirmed his sensation. This is where they were first learning to be different from each other. Where origin discovered it wasn't paradox, where law realized it was distinct from order. Noah's bodies continued absorbing the terrifying archaic atmosphere. Each breath brought power that modern existence had forgotten could exist in such concentration. His complexity and purity rose with steady certainty. 500,000 per second just from existing here. Ozymandias took in 1,000,000 purity per second. In the first folds, Hor continued, her tone growing more serious. It was said the spread out everythings of the creature were most concentrated. The existences that rose here held power that would make your current era's powerhouses look like children. Some of the first life forms and lineages originated here. Each one undoubtedly, roar! The sound cut through her explanation with physical force. Not just volume, but intent, a declaration that something had noticed them and found them interesting. Trees that had stood for eons bent aside like grass before wind. The ground trembled with footsteps that suggested mass beyond reason. A shadow fell across them that blocked out significant portions of that infinite sky. Noah's expression grew stern as he felt the approaching aura. It pressed against his enhanced senses with weight that made his recent advancement feel suddenly insufficient. He grasped the rearing stick tighter. This was power approaching Duke level, might already be there, just expressing itself differently than modern Dukes would. Through the parting forest came something that made evolutionary biology weep with confusion. Oh, outsider. Hor's voice carried dark amusement. You might not last a minute here. It seems the first thing you meet is a bit more complex than you. That is, the trees didn't just part. They froze and shattered. Glacial temperatures that could freeze existence itself spread outward in waves. White frost crystallized on surfaces that shouldn't have been able to hold moisture because moisture hadn't been properly invented yet. What emerged defied classification while somehow being perfectly recognizable. An Allosaurus, but reformed through impossible evolution. Allosaurus, a type of species of dinosaur. Its scales were white, not from brightness but from purity of color that predated color having impurities. Wings spread from its back that could have wrapped around small moons, each feather a study in living elemental authority crystallized into biological form. Its entire body crackled with power that made the air solidify and shatter repeatedly in its presence. The cold it emanated wasn't just temperature, but the concept of cessation through stillness, of endings through ice. Above its massive head, a halo crown spun with lazy authority. A declaration. This creature had achieved something that warranted existence itself, acknowledging its accomplishment. White-blue pupils that contained frozen galaxies fixed on Noah and Ozymandias, with intelligence that transcended animal cunning. This was a being, one that had survived in the breeding grounds long enough to become grand. Its jaws opened, revealing teeth that could bite through concepts, and Noah sensed something familiar radiating from it. Hunger. Not the pure, focused hunger of an inevitability, but the complex hunger of something that wanted to consume, to grow, to breed, to become more than it was. The standoff lasted seconds that felt like hours. Three beings evaluating each other across evolutionary distances that shouldn't have been bridgeable. The Allosaurus's tail swept behind it, each movement leaving trails of frozen space that took moments to thaw. Its presence made the breeding ground's already overwhelming atmosphere grow heavier, as if it was claiming this section of infinite forest as its territory. Chapter 4106. The First Folds. Through Ozymandias, Noah felt his inevitability body's response, recognition of another predator, evaluation of potential consumption, calculation of effort required versus likely gain. The tentacles that formed his other self's body writhed with anticipation that was purely mechanical, without emotion to color it. Through his primary body, Noah gripped the goad tighter, feeling its weight shift in response to threat. The Kleos glyphs on his forehead and arms pulsed, ready to call upon the authority of the goad and principle when needed. Well, Hor's voice whispered with what sounded like genuine interest, this should be educational. Either you're about to learn how combat worked in the First Folds, or you're about to become part of this creature's meal. How strong are you, outsider? The frozen Allosaurus took a step forward, the ground cracking under weight that transcended physical mass. Its approach was neither rushed nor cautious. It moved with the certainty of something that had never met anything it couldn't eventually consume. The first minute in the breeding grounds of the first was shaping up to be exactly as dangerous as Hor had predicted. Noah and Ozymandias stepped forward in perfect synchrony, both bodies radiating tyrannical confidence that made the frozen air crack with anticipation. So what? They said in unison, voices overlapping in harmonics that shouldn't exist. It is merely a creature at the cusp of Duke level. There are two of me. Merely. The Allosaurus tilted its massive head, intelligence flickering in those frozen galaxy eyes. It had never encountered prey that multiplied its presence while maintaining singular intent. At this moment, Noah began walking ahead. Tremendous effort initiated against superior enemy. Enemy complexity exceeds yours by factor of 12.7. All glyphs and resistances engaging autonomously. Principle of perpetual harvest is recognizing. Significant effort. True absolute existential resistance of perpetual harvest burns with glory. Passive effect. Attacks against you require 100x normal effort. Active effect. Your attacks amplified by effort invested. Current effort multiplier. Rising. The battle began without ceremony. Noah's goad materialized fully, its simple wood containing truths that predated complexity. Simultaneously, countless tentacles erupted from Ozymandias, each one reaching with hunger that could never be satisfied. The Allosaurus moved with speed that betrayed its massive size. Glacial authority erupted from its form in waves, each pulse dropping the temperature of concepts themselves. Trees, thousands of miles tall, began cracking from cold that went beyond physical. Noah swung the goad with intent to educate, to impose existential truths that would rewrite what this creature understood about reality. The wood connected with the barrier of swirling frost, and for a moment his truths began penetrating, telling the Allosaurus that cold was merely slow, that ice was just stubborn water, that its authority was borrowed rather than owned. But the creature had so much authority that the truths couldn't reach its core. The coldness froze the very concepts Noah was trying to impose, crystallizing education before it could take root. His goad struck again and again, each impact sending shockwaves through space and dimensions, but barely managed to crack the outermost layer of the creature's defenses. "Its authority is old," Hor's voice advised calmly. "Accumulated over years of survival here. You're trying to educate something that's been teaching others extinction for longer than you. Hugh? Effort recognized. Attempting impossible education. Complexity gained. 1,000. Purity gained. 1,000. Such prompts came and went every few seconds. Effort was applied, and effort was rewarded. Ozymandias's approach was different. Pure hunger attempting to devour everything. The tentacles reached through the frost, consuming the cold itself, eating the concept of freezing. Noah felt the euphoria of that first taste through their connection. Living elemental authority of such purity that it predated elements he had known. Ozymandias consuming living elemental authority. Purity gained by the purest. Hunger, for 10,000 Oz. Purity and complexity. Your main body gained. 2,500 Oz. Conversion efficiency at maximum due to pure existence. Such prompts kept on coming. But even as the tentacles gloriously devoured everything they touched, they still began freezing. Not just becoming cold, but having their hunger itself crystallized. The tentacles could consume the frost, but couldn't advance fast enough to reach the creature generating it. The Allosaurus watched this assault with what might have been amusement. It had been attacked before, challenged by creatures seeking to claim its territory or its genetic material. This coordinated assault by split existence was new, interesting, worth observing before ending. "Are you ready, outsider?" Hor's voice carried warning. "It's now going to really attack." Noah's eyes widened. Only now? Then what had they been facing this entire time? Behind the Allosaurus, reality began reorganizing itself. A radiant, illusory structure materialized. White-blue crystalline patterns that formed something almost like a glyph-fold garden, but more primitive, more powerful for its simplicity. The creature's eyes blazed with brilliance that made looking at them painful. Then the avalanche came, of snow, ice, and of authority itself. Coldness and frost elevated to conceptual weapons, falling with the weight of absolute zero given intent. The attack froze and also insisted that warmth had never existed, that movement was illusion, that all things should be still forever. All things should be still. Catastrophic attack incoming. Effort required to survive, tremendous. Enemy has paid massive cost to generate this attack. Your resistance requires equal payment in effort. Preparing all defensive capabilities. Noah raised the goad horizontally, using it as a shield against concepts rather than force. His entire body shimmered with the light of every authority he had accumulated, each one contributing to a defense that shouldn't hold, but did through sheer stubborn effort. Ozymandias took a different approach. He let his hunger run completely free. Every tentacle opened into a mouth, every mouth opened into an abyss, attempting to devour the entire avalanche regardless of consequence. The tentacles froze solid almost instantly, but they kept consuming even as ice, eating through dimensions that didn't understand they were being eaten. The attack lasted seconds that felt like hours. When it ended, the landscape had been transformed into a wasteland of crystallized existence. Everything within miles had been frozen so thoroughly that time itself moved slowly through the area. But in the center of devastation, two figures remained standing. Noah's form was partially covered in frost that seemed to be trying to convince his atoms to stop moving. Ozymandias looked like an ice sculpture of hunger, frozen tentacles still twitching with insatiable need. But they had survived. Strike while it's hot, Hor advised philosophically. Or in this case, while it's cold, but you're not completely frozen. Chapter 4107, The First Folds. So she advised. But Noah was already moving because both his bodies had made tremendous gains from that survival. Tremendous effort of survival recognized. Ozymandias devoured countless waves of living elemental authority during the attack. Purity gained. 200,000. Authority comprehension increased dramatically. Your gains from shared experience. Complexity gained. Plus 50,000. Purity gained. Plus 50, this is 1,000. Understanding of living. Elemental authority deepened. The power surge was intoxicating. Noah felt unfathomably alive as his complexity and purity rose in real time, the numbers meaning less than the sensation of becoming more with each heartbeat. Through Ozymandias, he experienced the pure joy of consumption. Everything devoured became power, became growth, became possibility. It made him want to seek even more thrilling battles, more terrifying challenges that would push him to edges he didn't know existed. The Allosaurus seemed surprised they had survived. Its frozen galaxy eyes narrowed as it reassessed these strange prey that grew stronger from being attacked. The prey required tremendous effort to attack. Noah pressed forward with renewed vigor, the goad singing through air that had forgotten what warmth meant. Each strike now carried more weight, his increased complexity allowing the truths he imposed to penetrate deeper into the creature's defenses. Ozymandias's frozen tentacles shattered their icy shells and reached again, hungrier than before, having tasted what this creature contained and wanting all of it. The battle evolved from standoff to gradual advance. Inch by inch, strike by strike, bite by frozen bite, they pushed through the Allosaurus's defenses. The creature fought magnificently, tail sweeps that shattered space, bite attacks that tried to sever cause from effect, wing buffets that sent both bodies flying through dimensions of the skies and smashing into the massively tall trees. It was glorious and chaotic all around, and throughout all of it was effort. Continuous effort recognized. Complexity, 5,000 principles, purity, 5,000. Note, your persistence is either admirable or insane. He continued, closer and ever closer. Continuous effort recognized. Complexity, plus 5,000. Purity, plus 1,000. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, Noah's goad touched scale. The body of the Allosaurus, the wood met the creature's actual flesh for the first time, and existential education began flowing directly into its being. Simultaneously, Ozymandias's tentacles reached the halo crown spinning above the creature's head. Boom! Roar! Half of it shattered instantly, devoured before it could regenerate, the authority within it becoming food for infinite hunger. The Allosaurus roared with fury that made reality reconsider its structural integrity. It fought tooth and nail, literally, claws that could rend existence, teeth that could bite through time. But Noah and Ozymandias kept advancing, kept chipping away at its defenses and authority. Then, in Noah's free hand, something materialized. The slipper of existential humiliation appeared with the weight of cosmic insult. Noah wielded it alongside the goad, education in one hand, humiliation in the other. The combined effect was devastating to the creature's sense of self. Conceptual diminishment activated. Target's authority slowly being made small and meaningless with every strike bar, size reduction beginning, the Allosaurus began shrinking. Not physically at first, but conceptually. Its presence became less imposing, its authority less overwhelming. The cold it generated went from absolute to merely terrible, from conceptual to simply physical. As it diminished, Ozymandias saw opportunity. Boom! The inevitability's entire body transformed, tentacles weaving together into a massive jaw that defied geometry. It opened with width that could swallow stars and clamped down on the diminished Allosaurus with finality that suggested the end of stories. The creature fought even as it was being devoured, roaring defiance into the hungry void. But Ozymandias's hunger was inevitable, and diminished authority was still authority to be consumed. Everything the Allosaurus was, its everythings of cold, of hunt, of survival, of power accumulated across eons, all of it was eaten away by the purest hunger. Hoo! Immense silence settled over the wasteland of frost. Noah stood breathing heavily, frost still clinging to his form but already melting from the heat of his advancement. The goad rested against the frozen ground, its wood unmarked despite the battle. Noah breathed out heavily as he felt his heart, beating with fervor and excitement. It felt very much alive. "You surprised me, outsider," Hor's voice carried genuine interest. "I expected you to run or attempt negotiation. Direct confrontation with something much more complex than you? That is noteworthy. A monumental achievement of effort has been observed. Both bodies contributed tremendous effort. Principle of perpetual harvest has experienced glorious weavings of effort and perseverance. Rewards calculated based on effort invested. Ozymandias, the purest hunger, gains purity plus 200,000. Authority integration. Living elemental, primordial frost. Noah Osmont gains complexity 150,000. Purity 150,000. Noah looked at the numbers and smiled brilliantly. His other body had higher numbers because it literally ate the Allosaurus whole, and even these numbers had yet to be fully counted. All of its everythings. The results were stupendous as inevitabilities, developed at an extremely fast rate. Special achievement. Impossible victory. Seed of principle of perpetual harvest has matured slightly. Access increased, 2% to. Resistance of perpetual harvest increased, 2%. Boom! Waves of green, white, and gold light erupted from both bodies as the principle acknowledged their achievement. The 2% access felt like doubling of possibility, the resistance making him twice as expensive for reality to oppose. But even that paled compared to what came next. As Ozymandias digested the Allosaurus completely, Noah felt complexity and purity flooding into him like sunlight through clear glass. The everything of a near-Duke creature that had survived in the first folds for years, it was beyond grand. It was ecstatic. Complete digestion of near-Duke entity in progress. Analyzing total. Everything's consumed. Ozymandias gains from complete consumption. Purity, 1,000, 1 trillion. Conceptual weight increased by 300%. Hunger evolution can now digest concepts directly. Noah Osmont gains from shared digestion. Complexity plus 250 onsen. Purity plus 250 sunrishalton. Frost immunity developing against living elemental authority. Understanding of breeding grounds. Ecology gained. Magisterial, glorious. There were too many words to describe the current sensation. Noah stood in the frozen wasteland, power coursing through both bodies with intensity that made his previous growth seem pedestrian. The first folds had proven themselves, dangerous beyond measure, but rewards that matched the risk. 23 hours plus remained, and he had already changed fundamentally from who he had been upon arrival. Oh, before we head to the next chapter, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep the stories coming. Chapter 4108, The First Folds. For Noah stood amidst the frozen devastation, both bodies radiating power that made the air itself nervous. The level of a duke, that impossible height that had seemed unreachable just days ago, no longer felt distant. He could sense it approaching, like seeing a mountain's peak through thinning clouds. Would it be close towards 10 trillion complexity? Above it? Duke level isn't too far from me now, he said aloud, testing how the words felt with a smile. Duke? Don't focus on some unknown paltry classifications, outsider, Hor said, her voice carrying amusement. What matters is your age. As an early creature, you can barely even be considered young. Your usage of authority was decent enough. Brute force applied with some intelligence. But when you fully grasp a principle or master the manipulation of everything, that's when you'll become truly extraordinary. So she said, and Noah's eyes flashed sharply as when he looked at his existence, his age as an early creature was no longer a thousandth to 1,000, and it was now closer to a hundredth 100th. He was going far, and he would simply continue. Noah and Ozymandias began moving away from the glacial battlefield, their synchronized steps leaving impressions in frozen ground that would take eons to thaw. The noise of their battle would certainly draw attention. Predators, scavengers, or worse, things looking to eat whatever had proven strong enough to defeat the Allosaurus. And if they came across an enemy they could not defeat, this entire trip would have to be ended early. They moved with increasing speed through the impossibly vast forest. Noah's enhanced body pushed itself, testing new limits, while Ozymandias' tentacle form flowed through space with hunger-driven efficiency, swallowing everything it could. Continuous movement. Effort recognized. Traversing primordial forest, first forest at high speed. Complexity gained, plus 500,000. Purity gained, 500,000. The trees gradually changed as they traveled. What had been chaotic growth became slightly more organized, as if they were approaching something that had imposed order on wildness. The ground showed signs of passage, not paths exactly, but suggestions that things moved through here regularly. Hours passed in minutes of subjective time. The forest that should have taken years to cross compressed itself before their determined advance. And then, shocking in its suddenness, they saw the forest's edge after a few minutes. Noah's eyes pulsed as both bodies stopped simultaneously. Beyond the tree line stretched something that shouldn't exist in a place called the breeding grounds, a village. But not just any village. The structures were massive, scaled for beings that made mountains seem modest. Stone buildings carved from single boulders the size of cities. Wooden constructs using those 1,000-mile trees as mere lumber. And moving through this impossible settlement were the builders, early creatures in humanoid form. They stood hundreds of feet tall at minimum, some hundreds of miles large, some reaching higher. Their bodies were perfection given form, but perfection that predated modern concepts of beauty. They wore clothing that seemed primitive, furs and hides and woven plant matter, but the materials glowed with authorities that modern existence had forgotten. A tribal settlement. Hor's voice carried deep nostalgia. This is how early creatures first learned to live together, before they discovered they could live apart. Noah watched a group of these beings working together to construct what looked like a temple. Each one radiated power that would make honored living existences flee, yet they cooperated with easy familiarity, laughing at jokes told in languages that predated words. See how they move? Hor continued. No wasted motion, no excessive authority. They've learned that in groups, efficiency matters more than individual power. This is civilization in its purest form. Beings choosing cooperation over constant conflict. A child. If something 50 feet tall could be called that, ran past their hiding spot, chasing what appeared to be a pet that was only mostly corporeal. The casual display of power in that playful sprint would have shattered wheels in Noah's era. And this child, this early creature, its aura was dreadfully that of a duke. It likely missed their hiding spot not because it could not sense them, but maybe they were akin to animals and flies in its eyes. These villages were scattered throughout the first folds, Hor explained. Each one an experiment in how powerful beings could coexist. Some succeeded and became the seeds of later civilizations. Others failed spectacularly and became cautionary craters. The architecture was primitive yet profound. Stone Age tools and techniques applied by beings who could reshape reality with their thoughts. A forge where hammers that could shatter concepts shaped metal that didn't exist yet. Gardens where plants that would become fundamental forces were being casually cultivated. If you went forward, Hor suggested with calculating tone, and presented yourself as an extremely weak early creature, which you are by their standards, they might take you in. Adopt you as they would any foundling. Noah considered this, watching the village dynamics. There was clear hierarchy, but not oppression. The stronger beings helped the weaker, teaching rather than dominating. Children were instructed in authorities that modern existence considered lost arts. Early creatures were social before they learned to be solitary, Hor continued. These villages were where they developed language, culture, the very concept of civilization. You could learn things here that no being in your era remembers exist. A hunting party returned as they watched, dragging something that made the Allosaurus look small. The entire village celebrated their return, sharing in the kill with equity that suggested advanced social structure despite primitive appearance. Of course, Hor added with dark amusement, they might also decide you're too weak to bother with and eat you, or make you their pet. Early creatures in this era were unpredictable in their hospitality. Noah observed for long minutes, both bodies processing what they were seeing. This village was a glimpse into how existence had organized itself before organization had rules. These beings were writing the first draft of civilization, making mistakes and discoveries that would echo through eons. The question was whether he dared to enter, to risk exposure to beings whose casual strength exceeded anything he had faced, for the chance to learn what they knew. Chapter 4109. The First Folds. Noah paused at the forest's edge, both bodies perfectly still as he took inventory of what he had become. The numbers that defined his existence now would have been incomprehensible just days ago. Current status assessment. Noah Osmont. Primary body. Total complexity, 687,293, 47,291. Total purity, 687,293, 47,291. Ozymandias, the purest hunger. Total purity, 1,823,938, 572,910. Complexity, 0, converted to purity. The disparity between his bodies was intentional. Ozymandias embodied purity of purpose, while Noah maintained the complexity needed for diverse action. Together, they represented over 2.5 trillion in combined values, numbers that placed him far beyond what he had been when first entering the earliest folds. Yet looking at the village before him, at early creatures whose casual movements suggested power that made his accumulation seem like a child's collection of pebbles beside a mountain, he understood how relative strength truly was. A being near the village entrance, perhaps a guard, though it seemed more interested in carving patterns into a stone than watching for threats, radiated complexity that Noah couldn't properly calculate. His senses suggested numbers in the hundreds of trillions, perhaps approaching quadrillions. He sighed at the disparity. And that was just one village member, apparently considered unremarkable enough to be given guard duty. The gap between his current 687 billion complexity and true suddenly smaller. Smaller because he had already traveled so far from where he started. Ozymandias's pure existence of 1.8 trillion purity gave him devastating offensive capability, but against beings whose very presence warped reality around them, even inevitable hunger might simply be ignored. 23 hours remained to change these numbers, to push closer to levels that might let him stand among such beings without immediately being recognized as dust that had learned to walk. Noah stood contemplating the pivotal moment about to unfold. The stories he had heard of early creatures painted them in contradictory lights, some benevolent teachers who had guided existence toward consciousness, others cruel tyrants who had used their power without restraint. He had experienced the terror of the mad elite, early creatures' destructive rampage that had obliterated an entire domain, and also heard of an early creature who built a sanctuary. Which would these early creatures be? He stepped forward with Ozymandias beside him, abandoning concealment for open approach. The guard at the village entrance continued carving patterns into stone that looked suspiciously like fundamental equations of reality, each chisel strike adjusting how space worked locally. Up close, the early creature's presence was overwhelming. His skin glistened with vibrant light as if crafted from living crystal, each facet catching and refracting authorities that shouldn't coexist. Across his massive form, tens of thousands of Kleos early living existential glyphs blazed with casual glory, not displayed for intimidation but simply existing as naturally as freckles on lesser beings. The air around him felt denser than any Duke Noah had encountered in his era, multiplied by factors that made comparison meaningless. This was power that had fermented, aged, become something richer through sheer duration of existence. The early creature turned slightly, eyes the size of houses focusing on them with interest. Have you peeked at us enough, little things? His voice boomed with good-natured awareness. You do know that when you gaze at others, they can feel it, right? Come forward. The words were calm, almost friendly, but carried weight that suggested refusing wasn't really an option. Noah and Ozymandias walked forward, both bodies deliberately allowing the early creature nature to leak into the surrounding space. It was a declaration. We belong here, even if we're small. Noah had his aura of an early creature burning with his blood also permeate from Ozymandias, even though he was an inevitability. The guard stopped carving entirely, his massive form shifting to observe them properly. His gaze lingered particularly on Ozymandias, head tilting with curiosity. Both of you carry our scent, but aren't you a bit too different? He seemed more intrigued than concerned. Oh well, come closer and let me look at you. They approached until they stood directly before eyes that could have swallowed them whole without effort. The early creature frowned, an expression that rearranged local weather patterns. You truly are extremely weak, he said without malice, just stating fact. But since you carry the scent, you should be one of us. It seems we come in all forms and complexity. Okay. The analysis was complete. His expression shifted to a smile that made nearby reality relax. Okay, come with me. I am Vexthul, the Pattern Keeper, guardian of this entrance for the past 3 epochs. He gestured with a hand that could have crushed mountains. What are you called? Osmont, Noah replied calmly. Ozymandias, his other body added, the voice gruffer through tentacle-formed vocal cords. Vexthul's smile widened. Os and Ozy, okay. Noah's eyes shone at the casual nicknames as Vexthul began leading them into the village proper. The path was sized for beings of Vexthul's scale, making Noah and Ozymandias look like insects following a giant. To be part of our tribe, Vexthul explained as they walked, you have to drink this drop of everything to ensure you won't harm those here. Well, even though you're weaker than even the livestock we rear. Haha, here you go. The early creature tapped the air, and reality responded by producing 2 perfectly circular drops of multicolored glory. They hung in space before Noah and Ozymandias, each one containing spectrums that shouldn't exist in the same dimension. Noah's existence trembled at their proximity. Utterly unfathomable loot observed. What an effort to even perceive this. What a harvest awaits. Item. Drop of everything. Verdant Eternia. Tribe. Description. Concentrated everything from the Verdant Eternia. Tribe. One of the oldest early creature settlements in the First Folds. Effect upon consumption. Binds consumer to Verdant Eternia. Non-aggression pact. Prevents harm against other tribe members. Grants tribal marking and recognition. Immediate gain. Plus 1,000. Pionisen, 1,000 complexity. Immediate gain. Plus 1,000 purity. Warning. Binding is existentially permanent. Note. This is how early creatures traded power itself. Oh, was that a trillion? Was it truly? Oh! Hor's voice rang in his mind with fondness and memory. Drops of everything. The currency between early creatures that all others sought but could never replicate. They were so powerful that they cultivated and traded everything's themselves. Her consciousness fragment pulsed with memory. Early creatures learned to extract, condense, and crystallize everything's into tradable form. A drop might contain someone's everything of joy, another's everything of strength. They would cultivate rare everythings specifically to trade, growing them outwardly or within themselves like internal gardens, harvesting them when ripe, condensing them into drops that could be consumed by others. Chapter 4110. The first leader, she paused, her tone growing more serious. The Verdant Eternia tribe, I don't remember much about them, but taking their drop of everything would mean they cannot harm you, and you cannot harm them. Such a thing would carry on permanently as if, let's say you were to meet early creatures from the Verdant Eternia tribe in your current age, which would be countless epochs and eons from now. Neither they or you would be able to harm each other. Hor said such words as Noah's eyes became stern, but his eyes remained luminous. He looked at the drop floating before him, then decisively opened his mouth and swallowed it. It was fucking 1 trillion in complexity and purity. He was swallowing it. Hoo! The sensation defied description. It wasn't taste or temperature or texture, but something more fundamental, like swallowing a small folds that immediately began unpacking itself throughout his existence. It tasted like glory, it smelled like quintessence, and it burned with fierce glory. Drop of everything consumed. First personal. Everything consumption detected. Principle of perpetual harvest recognizing monumental effort. Rewards calculating. Base gain from drop. Plot 1,000 towers 1,000 complexity. Base gain from drop. Plus 1,000 towers 1,000 eyes. Purity. First consumption. Bonus plus 250,000 toss 1,000 pounds 1,000 to each. Perpetual harvest pulses even further as it sits at 2% and increases the gains. Final gains. Complexity plus 1,500 1.5 trillion. Purity plus 1,500 1.2 trillion. He almost wanted to bellow and scream. It was like brilliant fire coursed through him as the waves of complexity and purity painted his atlas, his towers of Osmont, his heart, and everything else as everything began to exponentially scale upwards. Verdant Eternia. Tribal binding. Active. You cannot harm tribe members. Tribe members cannot harm you. Access to tribal resources. Granted. Tribal marking manifesting. The drop spread through his existence like liquid starlight, touching every aspect of his being. Joy flooded through him. Not artificial happiness, but the simple pleasure of becoming more. His first thought after the sensation settled was calculating just how many of these drops could he take from here. Beside him, Ozymandias consumed his drop with mechanical efficiency. Ozymandias. Drop of everything consumed. Pure existence consuming pure everything. Conversion at maximum efficiency. Purity gained. Plus 2,000 odds. Tribal binding established through shared existence. On both their foreheads, a verdant teardrop marking appeared, emerald green that shifted through every shade of life. No one noticed the same marking on Vexthal's massive forehead, though his contained additional patterns suggesting rank or achievement. Okay, little things O's and Ozzy, Vexthal said with satisfaction. Welcome to the Verdant Eternia tribe. Come, let us see what tasks can be given to weak things like you. The casual dismissal of their power should have been insulting, but in context, it was simply accurate. They were weak by the standards of beings who treated reality as suggestion. The question was how quickly that could change. As they walked deeper into the village, Noah's mind raced with possibilities. He had just gained 1.5 trillion in both complexity and purity from a single drop, something given casually as an entrance fee. If this was their currency, their casual trade, what other treasures did this village hold? The structures grew larger and more complex as they proceeded. What had looked like simple Stone Age construction from afar revealed itself as incredibly sophisticated. Buildings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Forges where concepts were given physical form. Early creatures of various forms moved through the spaces. Some humanoid like Vexthal, others abstract geometries that somehow radiated personality, a few that seemed to be living ideas that had decided to try having bodies. All bore the verdant teardrop marking, all radiated power that made Noah's trillion-level complexity feel quaint. The livestock pens are there. Vexthal pointed to an area where creatures that would be apocalyptic threats in Noah's era were casually grazing. The youngling training grounds are there. You're probably too weak to survive their play, so avoid that area. Each casual revelation painted a picture of civilization that would terrify even living existences of his current age. The drops of everything are distributed daily at the Everflow, Vexthal continued. Though with your limited capacity, more than one per day would probably cause problems for you. The tribe elders might find use for you. They always need subjects for testing new everything combinations. Subjects? The glory and loot that had provided itself so far faded as the reminder came that in these grounds, the mortality rate was unfathomably high. The implications were also astonishing regarding the experiments. Daily distribution of drops worth trillions in advancement. Elders experimenting with everything combinations. a society where power was so abundant it was given away as daily rations. Noah had found exactly what he needed, a place where 20 hours could transform him completely. The question was whether he could survive the transformation. As Vexthul led them through the village's main thoroughfare, the atmosphere suddenly shifted. Temperatures spiked without warning, and Noah felt his existence begin to burn. Not his body, but the fundamental fact of his being. A figure approached that redefined beauty through terror. Her obsidian skin seemed to drink light, while pure white flames danced around her form in patterns that suggested consciousness. Each step she took left crystallized fire in the ground that would burn for eons. Warning: atmospheric damage detected. Early creature's passive aura causing existential combustion. Persevering requires immense effort. Survival attempt recognized by perpetual harvest. Effort reward calculated. Complexity gained, plus 10,000, 1,000 for every second of perseverance. Purity gained, plus 10,000 test, 1,000 os for every second of perseverance. Oh? Noah gritted his teeth against the sensation of slowly ceasing to exist. How was this not considered harm? The tribal binding should have prevented. Syria, Vexthul called out with mild reproach. If you don't control your aura, you may just burn the new entrance. The female early creature looked down at them with eyes that contained supernovas as she titled her head. Her animal clothing seemed royal and ancient at the same time as her hair danced crimson gold, and her voice was like a sharp blade of existence. None here can harm each other. Before any permanent damage occurs, my flames would automatically be reined in. As if demonstrating, her white flames swirled and retracted into her body, the temperature dropping from existentially lethal to merely uncomfortably warm. She studied Noah and Ozymandias with obvious disdain. Are all newly born creatures becoming this weak now? They can barely withstand even ambient temperature. In chapters 4101 to 4110 of Infinite Mana in the Apocalypse, the story shifts from simple power growth to something far more profound. It begins with the first feast, symbolizing not just consumption of energy, but consolidation of authority. Noah isn't just getting stronger. He's refining control over higher layers of existence. As the second traversal unfolds, movement itself becomes conceptual. This isn't about crossing space anymore, but surpassing limits embedded within reality. Then the introduction of the first folds reveals a deeper cosmic structure, layered frameworks that hold authority and power within them. The tension rises as we see that control over these folds matters more than raw strength. And with the emergence of the first leader, hierarchy and organized resistance enter the picture. Power is no longer chaotic. It's structured. These chapters mark a turning point. Noah is no longer climbing toward the top. He's beginning to shape the structure of the summit itself. If you're enjoying these deep dive narrations of Infinite Mana in the Apocalypse, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more breakdowns and future chapter analyses. Let me know in the comments what you think the folds truly represent, and whether something even greater lies beyond the traversals. Until the next chapter, the ascent continues.